Welcome, everybody. It is me. It is the Cyber Warrior. This is Cyber Warrior Studios, and I know what you're all here for. You're all here to watch me drink. No. You're all here for Security Happy Hour. That's right. We got an amazing guest planned for you today. It's been a while since this guy's been on the show. He was on probably my first year. So, like back in 2020 sometime, he was in the mix. And, looking for guests, I felt it was about time to get him back on. Plus, he volunteered. So, it always helps when people volunteer to come on the show. But anyways, we got a great show planned. Please share, like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. Let people know we're here and we're the best damn show on YouTube. And we'll be back here in about 10 seconds. And we're back. And like I said, with me, I have, he put CW InfoSec. Do you want me to actually say who you are?
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally okay with me.
So we got Cody Winkler. Cody's been on the show, like I said. He was on a while back. I want to say it was in our first year. So back in like 2020. It's been a hot minute. We've been on the air for almost 4 years now. So it's kind of crazy how all that works out. But, it's since it's been so long, and now you're a veteran. I'm a veteran. We've had other veterans on the show. But, part of the premise is going to be around resilience and things like that. But before we get into that, tell me kind of, remind people of how you kind of got into cybersecurity.
Well, let's see. I guess right around 2010 is when I joined the Air Force. And that was, without question, my first major role in, anything IT related. And that was shortly after the 2008 recession. It was very, very difficult for young people to get a job at the time. It was extremely difficult. Honestly, like the current job market feels very similar to how it was back then.
Yeah.
So the Air Force was kind of, like really the only option for me at the time. And so I jumped into a career field called cyber transport systems. You can kind of think of that as like run-of-the-mill network engineering. I started off my first base after you finish your bouts of training. My first base was in Okinawa, Japan, and then from there I went to Osan Air Base in Korea, and then to Yokota Air Base in Japan again. So after that, I joined a company here in Missouri doing network engineering in kind of like an audit remediation sort of security role. But, it was really more in line with like PCI compliance and making sure that routers and switches and stuff were had strong configurations that the company could, pass like SOC 2 audits, PCI audits, things like that. And then from there, I got absorbed actually into vulnerability management. And that was like my first major InfoSec role. And that was really cool. Still at the same company ever since. And now I'm doing red teaming. Been doing that for 4 years and going strong.
Vuln management is fun though, and it's funny too because vuln management actually, and I think we discussed this back when you were first on and things like that. Vuln management kind of leads you into red teaming and vice versa, right? Because you got to be able to know both sides. How do you think doing vuln management, coming up in network engineering and things like that? Because I myself, prior to the conversion to 3DO, I was a 3CO. So my first stint in the Air National Guard was pre-new MOSs, and I worked help desk, server support. They trained us on everything, but I want to say I was a 3CO 7.2 when I converted. Maybe, yeah. That's it. Communications, computer systems operations was my job at the time. Then when the conversion came, they put me into cybersecurity, which was cybersecurity essentially for the Air Force, and then I went to the Army after that, active duty. But I find it interesting because you do, like, I think the Air Force is one of the best training opportunities I ever got throughout school, military, everything else like that, because of the way they trained you.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, it was crazy when we went through networking and they were like, we're just going to bring this cable out a little bit on your router, and like they would leave you, they'd kick you out of the room, like change a bunch of configs and stuff, but then on every so often they'd like barely unplug the networking cable, but it was just enough that if you didn't actually go through and check every layer to include physical, you were going to be beating your head off the wall. And there were a few times where they almost caught me. I was like, hold up, time out. Let me go into the back and start plugging everything and make sure it's all in there right. But yeah, it was some of the best training I got. Taught me how to troubleshoot. And then even in my time in the Air Force, it was, did you look it up? Did you Google it? Did you figure it out? And then from there, you kind of get into vulnerabilities and vuln management. And it just kind of like snowballs because you can't be a red teamer unless you know the vulnerabilities.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
from the blue team side, you can't find red teamers unless you know how to break into shit and what logs it's going to generate.
It's extraordinarily difficult to do that if you're not well-rounded, for sure. You know, and not just necessarily on the red team side, but I totally agree on the blue team side too. You know, EDR systems, they kind of give you, I guess, a little bit of hand holding these days. It just, hey,
Well,
I mean, I'm not.
we
Go
came
ahead.
up when it was just AV, when it was just
Yeah.
signature based. So hey, this malware is here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't
So
have all the process injection and things like process hollowing that like, you know, some of your EDR systems now, it'll be like, oh yeah, I went and did all this. No, we got to figure that shit out.
yeah, and even then, you know, like back in the day, like a lot of the main components that are kind of caked into EDR right now, I mean, they all used to sort of be like separate ecosystems, you know, like NIPS, HIPS. Like now that's kind of like conglomerated into one system now. You know, even beyond that, you got some sensor, you know, sysmon like command logging sort of facilities. They're all baked into it. And yep. I don't know if anybody out there has ever had the misfortune of paying for Splunk licenses, but you know, hey, bless Splunk, awesome product, ridiculously overpriced in my opinion.
Well, I mean, isn't the ongoing saying that Cisco got confused whether they were renewing their license or they thought they were renewing when they bought them?
Yeah. I think I heard something about this.
You know, so yeah, I mean, so talking about that, and Pat, of course, you know, I love Pat. He came in with a question, and I'll get to you, Pat, here in a second. But you know, red teaming is one of those things that takes a lot of time to really understand because. And now tell me your opinion on this. There is a difference between being a pen tester and a red teamer. And then even on top of that, we both know there's a difference with the purple team. But let's just talk pen test and red team right now. There's a huge difference between those two in my eyes. Would you agree?
Yes, unquestionably.
So what would you define as someone who's a pen tester? What is their goal and kind of what are they looking for?
Right. So with pen testing, and you know, I'm kind of speaking from ignorance on pen testing specifically because I kind of jumped from vuln management into red teaming. So I don't have any experience actually pen testing, but from the way that I understand pen testing versus red teaming, pen testing, you know, when you consider all of the different types of testing that you can kind of schedule or organize for your organization, right? You know, we'll just kind of summarize them up into like big three, right? So you know, like a vulnerability assessment versus a penetration test versus a red team, right? So with vulnerability assessments, right, that's typically going to involve like a big vulnerability scanner, you know, something like Nessus or Qualys,
Right.
Something along those lines. And then you're trying to find as many vulnerabilities as you possibly can across as many different systems as you possibly can. So we got to start there as kind of like a baseline. Jumping further into pen testing, we need to take it a step further. You know, aside from just finding as many vulnerabilities that could possibly exist in a given environment. Now, granted, penetration testing, they typically have, from what I understand, more limited scopes than a vulnerability assessment. So, but they keep that same kind of ideology. You know, within that more limited scope, you're still looking for as many vulnerabilities as you possibly can. But we take it a step further in penetration testing by demonstrating impact of exploitation.
Right.
So if we find vulnerabilities on a penetration test, we need to demonstrate the impact of what happens afterward after a vulnerability has been exploited.
Right.
In red teaming, we take it a step further beyond that, where we say we found a vulnerability, we exploit it, we demonstrate the impact of that exploitation. Now we also need to measure the ability of the organization to detect and respond to that vulnerability being exploited. So there's like a time factor sort of associated with it, but there's also like a detection factor too. If this vulnerability was exploited, right? Did we have a mitigation in place to prevent it in the first place? Probably not. If we take it a step further and we're now demonstrating impact of that exploitation, now we need to have the ability to detect that exploitation happening. And if we're missing that, then we also need to kind of measure, the blue teams, right? So in a red team, you kind of expect that there's going to be a blue team responding to the red team. So do the people on the blue team have a good ability or a bad ability to respond to the red team's activities? That's more or less like a really high level kind of difference between, at least in my opinion, between vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, and red teams.
So I'm gonna change it up on you a little bit. So in my eyes, a vuln assessment, nailed it, right? You're gonna run a Tenable, you're gonna run Qualys, Curate, whatever. You're gonna run your scans, and these are your vulnerabilities, and here you go, right? No validation, no can it be done, no is this legit, just vulnerability management, right? And then you have a pen test. A pen test is they're gonna take those scans usually, right? They're gonna run. A lot of pen test organizations have a vuln management program built in to where they can run Tenable on your system. They can run, anything like that. So Nexpose, you name it, they can run it all. But with that, now they're going to validate, right? What's the low hanging fruit? Can I get in? If I can get in, can I get to the domain controller, right? Can I become domain admin? Can I do all these things? But the thing is, they're noisy. See, a pen tester in my eyes is meant to run every tool under the sun. I'm going to run Metasploit. I'm going to run Mimikatz. I'm going to run Bloodhound and Sharphound. Like, I'm going to do all these things. And I don't care if I blow up your SIM or your XDR. I'm literally going to run everything to see how far I can get. And normally with a pen test, you have it one of two ways. Sometimes the blue team knows about it, so they know to, whitelist that IP just to see if it works through. Other times I've seen it where they're not notified because the CISO or the security director wants to see if there's a response, right? Because if you're running these tools and you don't get stopped, there's a problem within your organization. Now, you can work as more of a purple team aspect and kind of work hand in hand, like, hey, I ran X, Y, and Z. Did you see any of these alerts? But the other flip side to that is, hey, I ran all this and nobody stopped me. And like literally, I ran all these tools. It kicked off all these logs. All these alerts should have flagged me. Nobody stopped me. I got from point A to point B. My eyes, a red teamer, they still usually have something. I still imagine they have a limited scope solely because companies are still so, they don't want to bring down their systems. So they'll take their systems that are like, if you get in here, A, you're getting the keys to the kingdom. B, you're probably getting all their data. And they'll be like, and if you reboot it or do one wrong thing, it reboots or shuts down. It basically DDoSes it or DOSes it. So they're like, don't touch these ones, but touch these ones. Look, if you got a system that with an Nmap scan gets DOSed, you might want to fix that. Like, because you get that all day, every day.
Yeah.
So, but a red teamer is meant to be quiet. So they're meant to bypass. We're not talking assumed breach. I'm talking red team engagement from the core, whether it's physical onto, can I get into the network? What all can I do? Even starting externally, or, hey, we may go assumed breach, right? We're going to give you a VPN or we're going to give you something inbound, but you're meant to bypass all their detections. And then same thing as a pen test. But again, the difference is you're not necessarily running Metasploit, Mimikatz, and all this. A lot of times you're looking for what is the quietest way that I can get in there? How can I shut down that EDR? And I think to your point of EDR being with HIPs and NIPs and all this stuff being combined, I think that as good as that is, it's bad at the same time because now I got to shut down one system instead of three.
There's certainly there's a lot of nuance for sure. There's going to be a different definition for red teaming, probably amongst literally every company.
And that's why I
entire-
wanted your opinion. That's why I said I want to give both opinions, right? I wanted to see what you said because, again, to me, red team is quiet. You're not to be found.
Yeah.
And if you are found, great. That looks great on the blue team. But ultimately, your goal is to go undetected because you're more taking the black hat approach of let's see how far I can get without anybody seeing these exploits. Versus a pen tester that's just, they're basically your skitties that are just going to run in there, run every fucking hole under the sun. And if you don't catch me, you got a real problem in your organ. Like if you literally have no alerts from the shit that I'm doing, me and you going to have a conversation. We going to
Yes.
talk.
Absolutely. And I really feel like the main difference, like if we're going to summarize like the key biggest difference between a pen test and a red team, I would argue that any assessment where you're using like offensive capabilities and you are specifically not informing the blue team that this assessment is going on as some sort of measurement of their ability to detect and respond, I would say that alone defines without question the scope of the red team.
I could see that. I could see that because you want to test your response as well as, to your point, you're testing the response as well as what you can do and what exploits, vulnerabilities, things like that are there.
Absolutely.
And again, I think my only, I don't know, maybe it's me because of all the pen testing tools that are out there and all the detections that are out there. If you're not seeing me as a pen tester, because I'm gonna run every tool under the sun. I literally have them drop it on your system, and if you don't stop me, you're fucked.
Yeah.
We got bigger issues at play because I'm going to be loud. It's the equivalent of being on a box that's not supposed to have Nmap running, and all of a sudden you see a box running Nmap because they're literally just running basically mass scan across your entire network, and you're like, oh yeah, that's normal. But this is not a security box. Joe from finance should not be running Nmap or my mass scan.
Why did Joe from finance just escalate to enterprise admin? That's kind of weird.
So, that's kind of why I always ask the difference, because I think it's comical because we can all have a different opinion on it. The one thing I will say though is, to your point of like interacting with the blue team and seeing if they stop you and letting them know about the alerts, I think that's the biggest difference between a red team engagement and a purple team engagement. A red team will basically put out the fixes, and same as a pen tester, right? They'll put out the fixes in the report, how to remediate this, how to fix this, potentially what they should have caught. Whereas in a purple team engagement, you're working back and forth. Like I said, hey, I ran this. Did you see it? No. Okay. We know we're going to have to fix this alert. We're going to come together, tell you what roles you should have in place, and we're going to go like that. So I think that's the biggest difference, is how much engagement there is between the team doing the test and their interaction with the blue team.
For sure. And, like on purple teams, we typically give like timestamps and, like specific, really, really specific detailed information on what we're doing and when. So, and then like that information should line up with whatever the blue team's seeing in the CM too.
Right.
And that's really like the big key about purple teaming, because if the red team's telling the blue team, hey, we did something at this specific time, and the blue team's looking at the CM and they don't see that, that is what you want to, discover on a purple team.
Oh yeah, for sure. You need to know where your gaps are. Now, and I'll get the pass question here next, and then we'll probably jump into like resiliency and military and how it helped you and all that.
Sure.
But when you're doing these and you're working with these teams and things of that nature, what have you found to be kind of the hardest part of these engagements, in terms of like, I don't want to say company sign off, but in terms of like getting them to broaden their scope, right? Getting them to understand that you need to test these weak systems. I mean, you've been a red teamer for this company for 4 years. So,
yep.
I'm sure you've moved up. You're kind of in a position where you have a little bit of influence on how these things go down. So when you're looking at scope, I see so many companies check the box. I've heard of a few that are like, no, I want you to attack my weakest shit. I want you to run a vulnerability scan, and then whatever is the most critical and has the most critical vulnerabilities, that's what you're testing. I want you to give me leverage. Have you found a lot more companies trying to do that, or is it still, oh no, here's my small little internal network. Just test this one, please.
Yeah, in my personal experience, I kind of feel like the engagements that I've had the privilege of working on, I feel like many of them have been extremely limited in scope, like very targeted sort of systems and networks. So, what I try to do to encourage the clients to kind of understand, the broader goal of red teaming. I like to ask them during the scoping call, what is the worst possible thing that could ever happen in this network? Like, what is your biggest fear of anything that could possibly happen? Like anything from someone jumping up to domain admin to doomsday asteroids crashing into the data center, right?
Right.
And that kind of opens them up into thinking, oh, well, it'd be really scary if someone was able to, for example, get access to our backend databases,
Right.
right? And then from there, we start building goals for the assessment, because that's a kind of another key part of red teaming, is that it's very goals based, right? So we're not necessarily looking for every possible vulnerability that could exist. We're really looking for, what is like the sorest spot that you don't want to get hit on.
Right. Do you find you get more time in a red team engagement versus a pen test? Now, again, you haven't been a pen tester, but I've seen those go anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. And then whatever that time is, it's double the time report. So if it's a week engagement, you get 2 weeks to write the report. If it's a 2-week engagement, you get 4 weeks to write the report. But have you found that timing being limited has hindered you at all?
Actually, so I find that in red teaming we get a lot of leeway on how much time we can spend on our engagements, because the clients are very interested in very detailed and very specific sort of results.
Okay.
So if we ask for an extension on an engagement, it's not unusual for the clients to agree to it, because they want us to do our absolute best to evaluate their systems.
Right.
And so I guess to kind of I guess build a narrative around that, the longest engagement that I've ever been on was somewhere around 7 to 8 months. Yeah. Oh yeah. And at some point, an engagement can definitely go too long.
Yeah.
But on that particular one, and I got to be careful about NDAs and stuff, but on that particular one, the goal was really to assess the blue team specifically, to figure out,
Okay.
hey, what are they able to detect and respond to? And, if we have, an advanced persistent threat in the environment that has persisted for a very long time, how would our blue team respond or not respond to it? And, you get some pretty big eye openers on red team assessments.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. So before we go into like further questions about resiliency and all that, Pat does have a question. What is your day to day as a red teamer?
It might sound a little surprising. It's actually kind of boring. It's not, as kind of tying back into just how long some of these assessments can go. We don't have like an obligation to go, absolutely psycho in an environment like on a pen test, and just like detonating like Bloodhound and lighting up all of like ATA, like yeah,
But
we'll do
fun.
that, right? We'll definitely do that, but we usually kind of save it for like the end of the assessment. Like we're on like a 30 kill streak in Call of Duty, and we're about to call in like the tactical nuke, right? We call in Bloodhound. That's what we do in red teaming. So the day to day, I would say, is, at least for me specifically, this is going to vary for red teams, in different companies, but for me specifically, I find a lot of my time is spent doing research and development. So improving our capabilities on the red team, improving our evasion tactics, so that, you weren't wrong earlier. Evasion is a really big part of being on a red team engagement, because when you go into them, you don't want to give the blue team freebies, right?
Right.
Because that's like you don't want to help the blue team. Like that is the ultimate goal, but you don't like while you're testing, you don't just want to give them free wins, right? You
Yeah.
want to make them work for it. So evasion is most certainly a big part of the R&D effort because EDR systems they get better all the time, dude. Like, and especially I would say like over the last 5 to 6 years, EDRs have really improved a lot.
Yeah, they can all just go burn in the fiery pits of hell for what they've done to me on Pentest, because I have literally gotten on Pentest and be like, look, can you please kill your EDR on this machine so I can start running shit? Like, just please, just stop. Because it's a Pentest, so I'm not going to sit there and develop my own malware to bypass their EDR. Like, I'm going to run tools that could potentially get by it, but might get caught now because it's been out for a few months. Like, no one's developed anything newer. So we're going to try, and if it don't work, look, please kill your EDR. Please. I'm tired of getting told I can't run Mimikatz, like from memory, pulled from the internet. You are stopping everything I'm trying to do. Please kill it. Whereas the red team, that's what I was going to ask, is like with your R&D and your evasion, are you developing your own kind of malware and exploits to bypass these EDRs?
I don't know how much information I can reveal. So we use.
You don't got to tell me how. You don't got to tell me what. Just is it in your process to develop your own to bypass?
Yes and no. So we use a very popular and well-known commercial command and control framework that may or may not rhyme with Robot Reich, but
hey, I've got licenses to that.
But so we spend a lot of time kind of messing around with that and seeing, how many of the indicators that we can get rid of, because and even going beyond that, like we might change up our C2 framework on an assessment, because on one hand, there's kind of been a trend in the industry where a lot of the big EDR vendors are looking specifically for Cobalt Strike, and they're not really looking at other ones.
That's what a lot of your attackers are using. It's coming out in the IOCs. Hey, it's talking to Cobalt Strike. This is Cobalt Strike. This is Cobalt Strike. And before that, I think, well, maybe in the process, I think some of them were like PowerShell Empire or Metasploit, because now they all have commercial frameworks that are better than the community edition.
Right. And well, the thing is, you don't want your EDR to be like, so on one hand, you do want like the best detections possible, but you also don't want to pigeonhole it to the point where it can only detect one set of tools.
Right.
That would be bad. So that's kind of why you want to change up your tools and your tactics between engagements. It's and likewise, you want to do that for the blue team as well, because you don't want your blue team to get really good at detecting and responding to the red team, and then they end up missing real bad guys.
Right.
But on the flip side, you also don't want them to end up missing the red team either. So
well, and that's where your tabletops come into play, right? That's where you get your blue team's experience with tools. You allow them to take offensive security training, to know what tools are out there, to know what they should be looking for. And I think that's a big proponent of it on both sides, right? As a red teamer, you should be looking at running something like a security onion, a logarithm, sumo logic, whatever the case may be, running these tools in a lab, doing your attacks against different boxes and seeing what pops, seeing what blue team should see, seeing if the alerts are there, even from a base standpoint, right? Because a lot of these companies are like, oh yeah, we have all these MITRE roles, or we have all this, that, and a third. It's all AI oriented. Cool. I'm going to run all this shit. I'm going to use it as a normal system. And then I'm going to go and do something against the behavior after 60 days. And let's see how that plays out for you. Let's see if you actually catch it.
And honestly, those are really what red team assessments are for. You want to ask the big questions, but going beyond the big questions, you want to get the small answers.
Yep.
I don't really know if that kind of makes sense, but as a result of testing, you usually find out a lot more information about an environment than what your initial assumptions were, and that's really like a key point of doing red team assessments. You want to break those assumptions, and you want to get a real understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I know right now, languages are huge, right? Because they keep coming out with new ones. Now we got Go and Rust and Ryan Marston. Actually, I forgot to talk about it last week, but he's been working on and developing his own language and everything like that. So I've seen, I haven't seen it personally. I've heard of people like writing like, I don't know, listeners and stuff like that within like either Go or Rust. But as they're writing the code, they're EDR triggers. Like as they're writing the code, they save the file and all of a sudden that file is fucking caught. And they're like, seriously, it's not even supposed to be malicious. It's just something they're writing on their own time, developing like a program or whatever. And the EDR is like, nope, you can't do this. Whereas in other languages, I could literally write a whole network listener in Python. And unless I run the program, my EDR is like, go ahead, you can run it. Like, I ain't got a signature on it. It's a file. Like, cool. Until you run it and I see what it does, I'm not going to touch it.
It's a sad reality for a lot of businesses out there, because they spend a lot of money on these systems and they kind of expect, hey, we want to get our value out of our EDR. And, Joe from finance writes, I don't know, like some weird backdoor Trojan in Python, or I don't know, the PowerShell might not be the one, but
PowerShell is not going to get caught. That's native on systems because we're going to kill command prompt, but not PowerShell. You, as the general user, run PowerShell all day. But go ahead and try to pull up command line. Nope, that's forbidden.
Yeah. I distinctly remember being in the Air Force, and I
wasn't going to say that out loud because I got that from the Army also. That's why I said it, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember trying to pull up command prompt and it was like, nope, you can't do that. But PowerShell, you're good
Have
to
fun.
go.
Become an admin all you want. Go ahead. Because PowerShell at that time had the most ways that you could elevate your privileges. Command line, you couldn't. Like you could, but it took a lot of work. PowerShell back then, yeah. Nothing was catching that.
Right. And, that kind of speaks to, I guess, the pyramid of pain, so to speak, right? So there's this thing called pyramid of pain, right? The lower part of the pyramid, I apologize. I might get this wrong, so help me out if I kind of screw it up. But
it's been a while since I've heard it. I know what you're talking about. So go on, and if it triggers in my mind, I'll refresh your memory.
Right. So I guess the pyramid of pain, as I understand it, is a concept that's used to kind of relate to detection engineering. So at the very bottom of the pyramid, you have like your hashes, your signatures, maybe like specific tool names as part of your detections. And then as you get closer to the tactics, techniques, and procedures, I guess a tactic or a technique or a procedure would be like dumping LSAS as an example. Well, there's a million different ways to dump LSAS.
Right.
And if you're just looking for Mimikatz, on the pyramid of pain, yeah, sure, you'll catch Mimikatz, but well, what if they use something like I don't know, like
PowerShell Empire, Cobalt,
PowerShell Empire, I mean, even like Process Explorer from sysinternals, right? If you run that as admin, like you can just create a dump of LSAS and you just pipe that, like take that offline. So the closer that you get to the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures with your detections, right? And as you grow up that pyramid, you're going to grow from like those baseline static detections more into heuristics, where you're looking at behavior sort of things, and then going beyond that, you really dive into like the core internals of the operating system.
Yeah, definitely. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're watching this, please ask your questions. We're talking red teaming. We're about to get into resilience right after I ask this question from Pat, because Pat has to be Pat and ask more questions. Love you, homie. What are your thoughts on Havoc? Now, I've never used Havoc. I don't know what Havoc is. So if you've seen Havoc, Cody, please let us know, because I'm in the dark on that one.
Havoc is an awesome command and control framework. So it was developed by I'm gonna mess up his name, but C Spider, I guess. Sea Spider with a 5 instead of an S. And they are a very, very talented individual. I think they're quite young, like under 20 or something like that. And they are just an unbelievably creative and very talented programmer. And Havoc was one of the first command and control frameworks that had evasion capabilities kind of caked into it from the start. So
He was
and
19, Pat says, or
yep,
is 19, I guess.
yep. And so when you think, if you can kind of think of it as like as close to free Cobalt Strike as you can get.
Okay.
So really the difference is though, and I mean Cobalt Strike has really come a long way in recent years, but Havoc from the start had the ability to modify the system calls and the manner in which system calls were made caked into the framework. So if you're not familiar, so in the world of Windows, so for example, let's use like a stereotypical process injection sort of technique, right? So like virtual alloc, write process memory, and then create remote thread. So each one of those functions is made in userland, right? So when you call those functions, they are made in userland, and then Windows has a corresponding kernel level system call for each of those functions. Maybe not each one of them in particular, but by and large, like across like the Windows API, there's going to be a userland component, and then there's going to be a kernel system call component to a given function. And what Havoc did that pretty much no other command and control framework ever did was gave you the ability to kind of obfuscate the manner in which those system calls were made. And so if you want to get really like a really deep understanding of evasion technologies, Havoc would be a great framework to study and read its code on because it's got all of that caked into it.
What would you? All right. So, and actually, Angie put it up here. Well, Ange 31D, she said the same thing you said. Free version of Cobalt Strike for Havoc. And again, I need to play with it then because, well, I say that I might have my people play with it because I got to handle more of the managerial shit these days. But looking into it, and if that's the case, prior to like Cobalt Strike becoming really big, when we had Metasploit and then PowerShell Empire came out and things like that, I used a lot of Pi to exe, which originally was baked into, I want to say Metasploit. I could be wrong. But there was a command like Kali Linux back in the day and Backtrack Linux where you just took a Python file, said convert it to exe, and let's run. Now it's a bit more of a pain in the ass to do that. But that's how I've bypassed a lot of EDRs is I'd take a Python file, make it a listener. Literally, that's all it was a listener, and I'd bake in some other code like some BS characters and shit just so it would have a different signature. And I'd be able to bypass a lot of EDRs. I'm talking EDRs, not even AV, like EDR. All you had to do is Pi to exe, have a basic Python listener, and you were golden. And so I think like I wonder how that plays now with Havoc and all these evasion techniques because you would build in like when you went Pi to exe, like, do you want to evade anything? Oh yeah, I want to run encoding and encryption and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're gonna make you a BS hash and do all this stuff, and there you go, have fun.
Yeah, and there's kind of something to be said there, like with what Havoc does, just from the way that it's written. A lot of that's kind of why a lot of like these weird one-off language sort of malware loaders became really popular in recent years. Was not necessarily that it's easier to write malware in languages like Rust or Golang. You still got to go through like the same amount of effort, and a lot of the times you're still going to use like a lot of the same techniques too. But
Right.
the key difference is how the compiler organizes all of that code and links it all together.
Right.
So for example, right, if you have like a stereotypical like process injection sort of malware, right? Like I was saying earlier, virtual alloc, write process memory, create remote thread.
Right.
You can do all of that in Rust and Golang, but it's not going to look the same in memory or at runtime as it will if you write that exact same piece of code in Golang or Rust, because the compiler is going to optimize it in a very different way. And so,
Do you find it's easier these days, because we know we can develop malware in just about any language, right? Python, Golang, Rust, you name it, we could write it. Do you find it is easier to make exploits? Because what I've seen is a lot of people use C, C++, C Sharp, things like that, versus Python, Golang, Rust. Because it's a lower level language, now I can affect the assembly code and the binary itself and how memory is working. What have you found easier to get caught, right? Easier to be detected? Your higher level languages or your lower level languages? One takes 1,000 lines, the other one takes 100 lines. Let's be honest.
yeah, there's going to be more experienced coders that are probably going to laugh at what I'm about to say. But in my opinion, with the current state of affairs with EDR, I would say writing in other languages like Golang or Rust is going to be less likely to get caught than if you were to write in like Visual Studio, C++. And the reason
Okay.
that I say that is because there has been like 15, 20 years of EDR vendors, maybe even longer, specifically harnessing in like gathering all of these payloads that were written in Visual Studio. And a lot of these newer languages, granted time scales kind of vary, but a lot of these newer languages came out, within 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the EDR vendors are just now starting to understand, okay, there's a lot of bad guys switching over to these languages. So they're kind of playing like the catch-up game on those
Right.
ones. And that's kind of tying back into the pyramid of pain too, right? The higher up the pyramid of pain you're able to go with your detections, like the easier it's going to be to catch, the same techniques being used across different language families.
Yeah. Now we are at like 7:43, so I do want to tie in the other comment, the other topics we wanted to talk about. And I love you, Pat, but I want to break away from specific red team and
Sure.
malware development and talk more about resiliency, because we need that in cyber, we need that in red team and blue team, and we learned a lot of it that you don't get it all from civilian careers, right? It's not something you really develop. It's something that I found in my 13 years in the military, is probably in last, I don't know, 7 years. So I retired in 2017. So around 2011, 2012, they really started developing those courses for resiliency. It's something that I thought I had. I learned more in the military, and then I've still been developing. How have you found coming out of the military with the resiliency training you had through the Air Force, and the bullshit we had to deal with in the military, into the civilian sector, and kind of trying to stay balanced both mentally, physically in your job, like capable? How has that resiliency affected you, and what have you done to really, kind of stay mentally focused?
Good question. I guess I'll tie that into a personal note. When I started really doing content creation, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I guess maybe shortly around the time that you did. I think you've been in the game longer than I have, but right around that time was kind of when my life started falling apart. I was uh, I was engaged to uh, I was engaged to someone, roughly 4 years ago, and then that relationship sort of fell apart. And that was, well, I wouldn't really say that was like the beginning of the downfall. Really, the beginning of my woes in the most recent years was my best friend James disappearing. He went out. Like, long story short, he went out drinking with some friends 5 years ago, or almost 6 years ago now. and he just vanished. He never made it home that night, and nobody really knows what happened to him. And that was really tough to deal with, and it still is every day. He was an Army veteran, and he did a lot crazier shit than I will ever do, and he had a lot of struggles from a deployment that he went on in Afghanistan. So he was airborne infantry, and he had one particularly rough day out in the desert, and it really changed him a lot. And he was kind of there for me through all of my life. I've known this guy since third grade, and then just 25 years later, he just vanishes out of thin air. And quite honestly, the last conversation I had with him really wasn't a good one. I wasn't really like engaging in conversation with him. I was kind of off in la la land, not really being present in the moment. And I dealt with a lot of guilt after he disappeared, and it ruined it. I'm not gonna lie, that was kind of the last linchpin in my relationship with my ex fiance. And then having lost that relationship on top of basically losing my best friend, shit really started rolling downhill after that. And throughout that whole time, kind of dealing with that, and even some family issues kind of propped up afterwards. And what really kept me going through all of it was just knowing that there's more to life than what I'm currently experiencing. Like, there's always going to be a new day. And they kind of teach you that in the military too, where like especially in boot camp, there's some pretty hectic times in boot camp. And like, hey, it's not unusual for people to go 2 or 3 weeks without shitting because of how stressful it is. I've been
man,
there.
I swear, what was that? What was the ongoing saying? They were putting some in our water or food so that you didn't, because they wanted you to just deal with the shit, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, yeah, man. And so I mean, you learn a lot of lessons in the military that I think you have to either really pay attention to in the civilian world, or basically have someone else teach them to you. So one of those, as an example, in the military, and like there's some exceptions here, but when you're in the military, you really don't have to question anybody's allegiance to what you're doing, right? And so, like, as an example of that, like if you have an accident, you get hurt, out in the sidewalk or something, like you don't have to question that somebody's going to come help you and come help you get
They may laugh
assistance.
first, but they're
Right.
gonna eventually help you.
Right. Someone within eyesight of you will help you. And you may not get that in the civilian world, because people are very, at least in my personal opinion, people in the civilian world are very reluctant to get involved in conflict. And for good reason. You don't want to end up hurt.
No. This is what they do.
That too.
I'm gonna record it. I'm not gonna
Right.
help. I'm just gonna record it, and then I'm gonna bitch about it later.
That too, for sure. And you really don't have to worry about someone recording you while you're like choking on food in the military. Like someone will come give you the Heimlich maneuver, and then they'll be like, "Oh, did you see what I just did?"
Chew your food next time, asshole.
Right. And so having gone through like some pretty significant turmoil in my personal life over the last couple of years, especially over this last winter, I started having heart problems all of a sudden, but it turned out to be panic attacks, like really significant panic attacks. And that was kind of a wake up call to me, because over the last year in particular, I would say is really when it got to be the worst, because I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well, I wasn't exercising, I was kind of moping around all the time. And if you act like that, I mean, eventually your body is going to be like, okay, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to break down, and we're going to have like a total meltdown at some point. So part of being resilient is just kind of believing in yourself and knowing that you are able to take care of yourself. At least in my opinion. There's different
There's
ways to interpret it, but
there's more, but yeah, you're not wrong, right? It's resiliency is a belief in self, but it's also the ability to conquer. And all right, so someone put this out there, right? I just said me and Cody are both veterans. I've been through a lot of shit. I got a lot of pain I deal with on a regular basis. I'm always in pain every day. It doesn't change. You deal with it, right? You learn to live with it. You learn how to deal with different situations. I don't sleep. I have insomnia. I have anxiety. I have depression, stress, all that. Let's put it on the table. People who have listened to me, watched other videos, they all know this. Someone put it out there for everybody else. So I have not dealt with what Cody has dealt with, right? My family, I lost all 4 of my grandparents years ago. Shit happens. At the time, it crushed me. These days, yeah, it hits every once in a while, but for the most part, it is what it is. I have a brother that lives with me now. Met him in the Army. Great friend. I call him my brother because he really is. He'd be there for anything, and I'd be there for anything for him. But again, you meet these people in the military. It is very, very difficult to find these people in the civilian world. I'm not saying it's impossible, right? Some of us have friends since kindergarten, high school, whatever. You grow up, you live, you learn, you love, whatever. I didn't have that, right? All my friends left me. I was stabbed them back numerous times. And so finally I said, fuck it. And I bounced. I left. Resiliency comes from being able to stand up and realize that you can do anything. You just got to find what's going to get you there. So one of the things and one of the common themes in everything I talk about is you find your own path. You find your own path to greatness. You find your own path to yourself. You find your own path to whatever it is. It could be faith. It could be family. It could be friends. It could be whatever. But you find your way to make yourself better. As long as you are improving as a person, that's what matters. So the one thing I like to tell people every day, especially when they're struggling, right? They're depressed, they're having anxiety issues, they're having panic attacks, all this other stuff. And a lot of that stems from A, you have all the bullshit that's happening in your life. B, you don't feel like you're making any progress. You're not accomplishing anything. You just feel like you're stagnant and it's just getting worse. Make your bed every day. Make your bed every day. Single, married, don't matter. Wake up, make your bed. Even if it's just your side. Your spouse or significant other still sleeping, cool. Tuck them in, make your bed. You're good to go. You did something, you accomplished something. So even if you didn't accomplish anything the rest of the day, you accomplished that. You achieved something. And that way it starts to trigger and it starts to change your mindset. And that's how you have to look at things. That I learned from my mother. Oddly enough, you actually do learn shit from your parents when they take care of you. And I learned that from my mom because me and her had a huge conversation about that. When I told her I felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything on a day-to-day basis. Because my goal has always been to help other people. Well, if you don't talk to people, if you aren't dealing with things on a regular basis, what are you accomplishing? What are you actually achieving? Make your bed every day. You've now accomplished something. You can now check that box, see it on your board, see it in a book, whatever the case may be. Life sucks. Life's tough. Get a helmet. I believe in that. But I also believe there's a way to change your mindset. Me and my doctor talk about it every month. Every month. How can we get better? How can we improve? And when it comes to resiliency, nothing works better than making your bed every day and truly believing, I did one thing today. Tomorrow, let's make it 2. Let's make it 2 tomorrow. Let's make my bed and maybe clean the living room or, do something at work or mow the grass or plant some flowers, whatever it may be. Work your way up to being your best self. But accomplishing one thing every day, you're good to go. If you have a day where you get knocked back up, that's fine. I'll fix it tomorrow. Let me deal with this today, and we'll go about it the next day.
Completely
but the whole
agree.
kicker to that is talk to somebody. And Cody, I'm kind of upset you never reached out, but we'll have that conversation later.
That's fair. I deserve that. But I really like what Jack just said. If life gives you lemons, you don't make lemonade. You learn to tolerate lemons better. That kind of encompasses the core component of resiliency, in my opinion. That's fantastic. Let me ask you a question. Do you still make your bed with hospital corners?
I used to until my wife yelled at me.
She was just like, yeah, don't do that anymore. Just make the bed
Like,
normally.
because she hated how I made the bed. So now I just find something else that I can accomplish every day. Even if it's like I'm gonna, drink less caffeine or smoke less cigarettes. I find some goal I know I can accomplish that day and do it.
Yep.
Because of that reason. I need to accomplish something. I have tasks and checklists for work. As long as I can get at least one thing done, I know I'm accomplishing things. But yeah, I did that for a long time. For a long time. Because it was more comfortable for me, right? The bed's tight, it looks neat. But then my wife got mad at how the bed looked. She's like, don't be doing that shit. I'm like, fine. You make the bed from now on. I ain't doing it no more.
Oy.
It also doesn't help. We have like the fitted sheet, the folded sheet, and like 8 blankets on our bed. Like, you really run out of space for hospital corners after like blanket 2. Like blanket 2, and now I can't do them no more. It just don't work.
That's fair. I go with the simple caveman tuck technique. I just lay them out all smooth and then just tuck them all underneath.
That's what we do now.
That's the way
I
to
even
go.
did that recently, because like before I left, I was in Charlotte this past week for work, and we 5 boys, right? So my wife's constantly trying to clean the house. She's trying to do laundry, all this other stuff, and so for about a week, we had a ton of shit on our bed, and we couldn't sleep on our bed. We were sleeping on the couch. And so I was about to leave. I was leaving Monday. So I was like, I think it was like Friday night. I was like, I ain't dealing with this shit no more. I'm going to spend the rest of this week in a shitty ass hotel bed. I am sleeping in my fucking bed. And so I cleaned off the entire bed, made the bed. Wasn't perfect. I didn't care. I was like, I just want to be able to sleep in my fucking bed next to my wife and enjoy my night. I just want to be, all I want. So I managed it for 2 nights before I had to leave for Charlotte for a week.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, honestly, just going to Charlotte for me personally, I mean, that would kind of need like a resilience kind of boost in itself. I mean, Dave, don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on North Carolina. I'm just saying Charlotte in particular. Can't stand driving in that city.
I didn't have to. I literally walked. So work at our hotel for work, right? Because I was there on a work event. You could walk. The convention center was across the street from the hotel where everything was at, and even the client I had to see the first 2 days was only like a few more blocks down. So it worked out great. I was able to walk everywhere. Needless to say, though, if you spend 4 hours walking in an airport because you're bored out of your skull, you don't want to go back through security to smoke. Your feet start to hurt after a while. Just saying. My feet were killing me by the time I came home Thursday because of all the flight delays.
Yeah, honestly, like everything about Charlotte, just like navigating Charlotte, like especially the airport, man. I feel like that place is like the Chamber of Secrets out of Harry Potter, dude. Like, it felt like I was waiting for like a basilisk to like come through one of the narrow hallways.
Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's airport, that's rough. Because it's like, all right, so you got it's like, I don't know, it's weird, man. You get off the bus that takes you to the terminals, because it isn't even you walk to the terminals. You get through security, then you got to take this bus or subway or whatever, and apparently Instagram decided to disconnect my stream because it's been over an hour. Fuck them. You get on this thing, tram or whatever, and it like speeds you down to the terminal area. And then you're like, all right, where do I need to go? Oh, you need to go to D. A, B, C. I mean, it's a gorgeous airport. There's a lot of shit there. But look, you want to talk about confusing, come fly into Pittsburgh. I'll come pick you up, and we'll hang out. But go ahead and find your way around that fucking airport. No. Dude, it is not easy.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think let's touch on one more thing.
Sure.
One more thing. And it's going to be your final thoughts. But I want you to bring together kind of everything, because I know resiliency ties into cybersecurity a lot.
Absolutely.
Because it is a very, very hectic, very go type of career field that people don't understand. Whether it's red team, blue team, It doesn't matter what you're doing. IT and cybersecurity wreaks havoc on mental health. What advice would you give to people both to be a technician and then to be resilient within the industry?
This industry really can be brutal. And, you know, one way that I think it can be brutal in particular is for folks trying to get into the field. It can be absolutely relentless for people simply just trying to get their foot in the door. So, just building off of that context, right? Resiliency is just not giving up, especially when things get tough. If you have a dream of working in infosec and you're going through 100, you're going through 200 interviews, maybe even 3 or 400. I mean, that can really get you down. That can make you feel like, damn, I'm not worth a shit. But that's not true. That's not true. People are a lot stronger than what they like to believe. You just gotta find that strength within yourself. You got to believe that you can strive and you can make it through it. Resiliency is really about endurance, in my opinion. Like you really got to be in it for the long haul, and like especially for people that are already in the career field, it can be absolutely menacing for some people. Like especially if you have a family. I mean, it's not unusual for some careers to be working 12, 14-hour days. And, a lot of these positions are salaried. You're not getting paid overtime for some of that. You even going into on call and things like that. Like you really gotta be tough. And, you make a lot of sacrifices to work in this career field. So when you want something bad enough, generally you will do whatever you can to achieve it. And you know sometimes this career field isn't for everybody, and that's fine. That doesn't necessarily mean that red teaming specifically isn't for you. But there's a lot of places in infosec, maybe getting down the road, maybe you want to spend more time with your family. Hey, maybe consulting pen testing isn't for you, where you got to travel 30 to 40% of the time. That's okay. At some point, the jig is up, so to speak, and you just got to be like, okay, maybe I can't do this thing, but I can still do other things. And that's really like the key point is, when things get tough, it's kind of like what Bruce Lee used to say, be like water, just kind of go with the flow, figure things out as you keep going along. But really the key is to not give up.
Yeah, definitely. I don't disagree with that. And I think a lot of people right? And I'm one of them. I like to blame the industry. I like to blame the recruiters. I like to blame the hiring process. I like to blame all these things. And I'm a hiring manager, and we'll still blame the hiring processes, the recruiters, and everything else. But at the end of the day, sometimes it comes down to you, right? If you've had 300 resumes and applications go out there and you've not heard back from a single one, what's missing? What can you do better? This is where I'm going to flip it kind of on its head and be like, you have to start taking a hard look at yourself, your knowledge, your capabilities, and what you're putting on paper. Or are you reaching out? Are you networking? Are you talking to others? Because if you're blindly applying, now mind you, I'm one of those people that'll tell you, if you're looking at requirements, stop. Look at the job description. If you think you can do it, just apply. Fuck the requirements. Literally look at the job description. If you think you can do it, apply. But the caveat to that is, one, can you truly do it? Two, do you know anybody in that company, in that industry, in that field that can make it, that they can spread your name and make it to where it makes sense for you to apply? If you're doing this blindly where nobody knows you, where you've not talked to anybody, where you have no connections, good luck. Have fun. I hope you meet the requirements that are going to now bypass you on the ATS because nobody's going to see you. Like, You have to look. You have to be cognizant. If you apply at my company, reach out to me. If I'm not the hiring manager, I'll find the right one. But I'm also then going to look at, what do you know? Who are you? And what are you capable of? What have you done? What posts have you made on LinkedIn? What comments have you made? Like, who are you on Twitter? Who are you on Instagram? Like, I want to know you, because who you are as a person says a lot about how you're going to work at the job. Family oriented, great. 5 kids, wife. I spend a lot of time with them, as much time as I possibly can. I'm okay with that. I'm talking about day-to-day work, day-to-day learning. Are you learning in public? Are you growing as a person? Are you growing on everything else? I have 2 podcasts. Don't get it twisted. I spend a lot of time away from my family. But everything else, work, here, family, you got to find balance. I find mine. Find yours as long as you're consistently growing and as long as you're consistently doing better. But if I can't see proof of that, I don't know who you are.
Yeah. I really need to get back to blogging. Like I kind of abandoned my blog, so to speak, over the last couple of years. But one post that, your story kind of reminded me of was a post about, labeled "The Power of Friends in InfoSec." This is this was like a key turning, that blog post, the story behind it was like a key turning point in my entire career. So basically what happened was I went on a work trip to Wild West Hacking Fest. Awesome conference, by the way. If you ever get the opportunity to go to Wild West Hacking Fest, out in I think it's called Tombstone. Yeah, Tombstone, South Dakota, I think is where they have it. Maybe not Tombstone. Deadwood, South Dakota. That sounds right. So I went out to Wild West Hacking Fest, and this was right around the time where I was looking at getting into pen testing and red teaming because I was still in vulnerability management at the time. And I had just gotten OSCP. I had maybe 1 or 2 CVEs under my name at the time. So I was kind of like, I'd love to get into pen testing, but I'm having a really hard time finding a job trying to do that. And I ended up running into Heath Adams, the cyber mentor, at Wild West Hacking Fest. And he and I shared a beer. We talked with another guy named Jake Nolken, and they introduced me to VetSec, which is an awesome InfoSec specific
I'm in their
organization.
Discord. I don't talk in there, but I
Yeah.
was trying to get in their Slack. It never happened. There were a bunch of things went on, but whatever. Either way, VetSec is amazing.
Yeah, VetSec is awesome. I was kind of talking with the cyber mentor Heath. I was talking with him about my job searching woes at the time, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of at the point of like giving up the idea of trying to be a pen tester or red teamer someday." And he was like, "Dude, do not do that because you have OSCP, you have CVEs, you've been in the industry for a long time. You probably just need to work on like 1 or 2 little things, probably on your resumes, like give it a look over. Like do not give up on it because clearly you have like some skill that's relevant to pen testing and red teaming. So honestly, you need to pursue this a lot more than what you have been."
Yeah.
And some people you might receive it as kind of like a kick in the ass, it's like, damn, maybe I haven't been trying hard enough. But to be honest, he was right. Like I wasn't. And I don't
You
regret that
probably did
interaction
what I
at
did.
all.
You probably did what I've done. I used to get so pissed about not getting hired. Now, mind you, I relied on my certifications and my degree, right? And my military experience. I do not have a different resume for every job. Same resume, every job. The only reason I've got to where I'm at is because of my network. Because of who I know. We've had conversations. They've seen my show. They know I learn in public. All this other stuff. That's how I got where I'm at. Resume was secondary. I literally just started throwing shit on there just in case shit hit the fan and I need another job. That was it. My resume is not something you want to replicate because it is not geared towards a specific job at all. I am working, my boss, I've worked for now, this is my 3rd company working for. That's how I went. But you can do that too. If you work for somebody, be brand loyal or person loyal. Be loyal to people, not companies. Companies can fire you and replace you. If you're loyal to people, they will always find you.
100%.
But saying that, Cody, it's been amazing. Feel free to hang in the back. Everybody here, you're all my warriors. You're all my family. You all know that. Feel free to tune in anytime, every week, every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I will always be here. That's not going to change. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all those fun things, because we need to get the word out there, because literally, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this for free. Like, I'm hitting a breaking point, people. Y'all need to help a brother out. But look, I love you all. If you know anybody that wants to be on this show, have them reach out. Otherwise, take care. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you next week for another amazing episode of Security Happy Hour.